The galaxy had 4,000 spacefaring species. Some were old as the stars themselves. Some had conquered entire sectors of space before Earth had formed from cosmic dust, and somewhere on the outer rim, in a small and unremarkable corner of the Milky Way, lived humanity. They were newcomers. Children, really. 200 years ago, human ships had crawled out of their solar system and met their first aliens. The Concord, the great alliance that governed most of civilized space, had welcomed them the way one might welcome a stray animal, with amusement, with mild curiosity, with the quiet understanding that these creatures would never truly matter. Humanity was classified as a Class 7 civilization. This was the lowest rank possible for Concord membership. Their ships were slow, their weapons were weak, their bodies were fragile, and their lives were tragically short. Most humans lived less than a century. To species that measured their existence in thousands of years, this seemed almost cruel. How could any creature accomplish anything meaningful in such a brief flicker of time? The elder races looked at humans the way giants might look at ants. Clever little things, busy little things, but ultimately insignificant. Admiral Elena Vance stood on the bridge of the ESS Vigilant, humanity's flagship. The ship was considered impressive by human standards, 1/2 kilometer of steel and determination, but she had seen Vethkai crystal carriers that stretched for 50 kilometers. She had watched Korani hive ships that carried populations larger than Earth's major cities. Her ship was a toy compared to the vessels of the elder races. She was 53 years old. Her hair had turned gray at the temples. Her eyes were sharp and cold, and behind them lived a fury that she had learned to hide many years ago. Every diplomatic meeting, every casual insult, every time an alien looked through her like she was nothing, she remembered. She kept count, and she waited. In the great chamber of the Concord, Ambassador Corin Osei took his seat. The chamber was vast beyond imagination. Thousands of species had representatives here, and the architecture had been designed to humble visitors. Pillars of living crystal stretched toward a ceiling lost in artificial clouds. The floor was made from the compressed matter of dead stars. Osei was a patient man. He had served as humanity's voice in the Concord for 22 years. In that time, he had smiled through insults that would have started wars between other species. He had nodded politely when elder races spoke of humans as useful servants or entertaining pets. He had watched humanity get cheated in trade deals, denied access to advanced technology, and treated as a footnote in galactic history. And through it all, he had smiled, because that was his job. To smile and nod, and make the galaxy believe that humanity accepted its place at the bottom. Today, however, his smile felt heavier than usual. The Dominion of Shal had submitted a petition to the Concord. The Shal were ancient creatures, tall, skeletal beings with skin like dried leather and eyes that burned with cold fire. They had ruled their sector for 10,000 years. They considered themselves second only to the Vethkai in importance. The petition was simple. The Dominion wanted 3 human colony worlds. Not the people, they had no use for humans. Just the planets. Rich in rare minerals, perfect for Shal mining operations. The 900 million humans living on those worlds would need to relocate. The Concord had called this hearing to discuss the matter, but Osei knew it was not really a discussion. The outcome had been decided before anyone entered the chamber. The elder races would vote to approve the petition. Humanity would lose 3 worlds, and the galaxy would continue spinning as if nothing important had happened. The Shal delegate rose to speak. His name was Lord Vekros, and he stood 3 meters tall. When he looked at Osei, there was no hatred in his eyes. Hatred would have required him to see humans as worthy of strong emotion. There was only boredom. The Dominion requires these worlds, Vekros said. His voice echoed through the chamber. The resources beneath their surfaces are essential to our economic expansion. The current occupants have been given adequate notice. 1 solar year should be sufficient for the short-lived ones to relocate their settlements. He said the last word as if describing a child's sandcastle. The Vethkai speaker, a being of living crystal that pulsed with inner light, nodded slowly. The petition seems reasonable. The Concord recognizes the Dominion's claim. Does the human delegation wish to respond? Every eye in the chamber turned to Osei. Most of them expected silence. Some expected begging. A few hoped for tears. Humans were known to leak water from their eyes when distressed, and some species found this amusing. Osei stood. He adjusted his formal robes, and when he spoke, His voice was calm and measured. The human delegation formally objects to this petition. These 3 worlds are home to 900 million of our citizens. They have lived there for over a century. They have built cities, raised families, and buried their dead in that soil. We cannot simply relocate them as if they were cargo. Vekros made a sound that might have been laughter. Cannot? Or will not? Both. The chamber fell silent. This was unexpected. Humans did not refuse. Humans did not stand firm. Humans accepted what they were given and thanked the galaxy for its generosity. Vekros stepped forward, his skeletal form casting a long shadow across the chamber floor. Perhaps the ambassador does not understand the situation. The Dominion is not asking permission. We are informing the Concord of our intentions, if the short-lived ones wish to challenge us. He paused, and cruel amusement flickered in his burning eyes. Do the short-lived ones wish to challenge the Dominion? Every other human who had stood in this chamber had backed down at moments like this. Every other human had lowered their eyes and accepted humiliation. The galaxy had trained humanity to be small, to be quiet, to know their place. Osei smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not a diplomatic smile. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting a very long time for this exact moment. Perhaps, Osei said softly, the Lord Vekros does not understand something either. He let the silence stretch. Let the confusion ripple through the chamber. The Dominion sees humanity as weak, as small, as insignificant. You have believed this for 200 years. Every species in this chamber has believed it. He looked around slowly, meeting the eyes of delegates from 100 different worlds. You have looked at our short lives and seen limitation. You have looked at our slow ships and seen primitives. You have looked at our small territory and seen a species barely worth noticing. Vekros snorted. Because that is what you are, is it? Osei's smile widened slightly. The Dominion has never wondered why humanity never complains, never pushes back, never demands more than we are given. Because you know your place. No. Osei shook his head slowly. Because we are patient. For the first time, something cold moved behind Vekros's burning eyes. Something that might have been the distant ancestor of uncertainty. The human delegation formally objects to this petition. Osei repeated. I advise the Concord to consider its vote very carefully. He sat down. The chamber exploded into noise-confused chatter, dismissive laughter, angry demands for clarification. But somewhere in the shadows of the Great Hall, something ancient stirred. The Watcher had observed humanity since their first radio signals leaked into space. It was an artificial intelligence older than most civilizations, and it had seen countless species rise and fall. It had dismissed humans along with everyone else. But now, for the first time, it looked closer, and what it saw in Ambassador Osei's smile made its ancient circuits run cold. The vote proceeded as expected. The Concord ruled in favor of the Dominion. Humanity had 1 year to evacuate 3 worlds. Osei accepted the decision with a polite nod. He thanked the Concord for its time, and then he walked out of the chamber without looking back. In her ship, Admiral Vance received the news. She had expected this outcome. They all had. She opened a secure channel to Earth. It's time, she said. Authorize Prometheus. On the other end, a calm voice responded. Authorization confirmed. The waiting is over. Elena Vance closed the channel. For the first time in decades, she allowed herself to feel something other than patience. The galaxy thought humanity was weak. The galaxy was about to learn how wrong it had been. News of the Concord's decision spread across the galaxy within hours. On 10,000 worlds, alien species discussed humanity's latest humiliation over meals and drinks. The story was always told the same way the foolish humans had dared to object, and the Dominion had put them in their place. Some found it amusing, others barely noticed. Humanity's problems were humanity's problems. On Earth and across human space, the reaction was strange. There was no panic, no protests in the streets, no politicians making desperate speeches about fighting back. 900 million people had just been told to abandon their homes, and the human species responded with something that looked almost like calm acceptance. The elder races saw this as proof of what they had always believed. Humans were weak. Humans were cowards. Humans knew when they were beaten. They could not have been more wrong. In the deep shipyards of Titan, lights flickered on for the first time in decades. These facilities had been listed as abandoned In every official record, maintenance drones had kept them in perfect condition, waiting for a day that most humans hoped would never come. Now that day had arrived. Admiral Vance stood in the command center of Titan Station, watching construction drones swarm over vessels that should not exist. These ships looked nothing like the slow, bulky cruisers that humanity showed the galaxy. They were sleek and predatory, built from alloys that no Concord scientist had ever analyzed. Their engines operated on principles that the elder races had dismissed as theoretical impossibilities. "How long until the fleet is ready?" Vance asked. Commander James Chen checked his displays. He was young, barely 40, but he had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. "The core fleet can launch in 3 months. Full deployment in 6. Make it 2 months. The Dominion won't wait." Chen nodded. He did not argue. He did not ask if it was possible. Humans had learned long ago that impossible was just a word that meant try harder. Across human space, similar scenes played out. Research stations that officially studied agricultural improvements suddenly switched to weapons development. Universities that taught basic physics began advanced seminars on dimensional manipulation. Factories that produced civilian goods retooled overnight to manufacture war material. And through it all, humanity maintained its mask. Cargo ships still moved slowly through Concord space. Diplomats still smiled and accepted insults. Human tourists still gazed in wonder at the great monuments of the elder races. Let them see what they expected to see. Let them believe the performance. The truth would come soon enough. Ambassador Osei returned to Earth for the first time in 5 years. He met with the United Council, the governing body that humanity allowed the galaxy to know about. What the galaxy did not know was that the Council answered to a deeper authority, a shadow government that had existed since first contact, preparing for the day when smiles would no longer be enough. "The Dominion will move faster than they announced," Osei reported. Vekros was embarrassed by my response. "He will want to make an example of us." Council leader Amara Diallo nodded. She was old now, well past 80, but her mind was sharp as ever. "Then we accelerate our timeline." "Admiral Vance?" The holographic image of Vance appeared at the table. 2 months for the core fleet, but I recommend we allow the Dominion to enter our space first. Let them see the colonies empty. Let them think they've won. When they're deep inside our territory, with no understanding of what they're facing, that's when we emerge. "Psychological warfare," Diallo said. "Make them experience confusion and fear before the first shot is fired." Yes, these species have never faced a real challenge. They've bullied smaller civilizations for so long that they've forgotten what it feels like to be afraid. We need to remind them. The Council voted unanimously. Operation Prometheus would proceed. 200 years of patience would finally bear fruit. In the depths of interstellar space, the Watcher processed the data it had gathered. This ancient AI had observed countless civilizations, and it prided itself on accurate predictions. Humans had always registered as a minor species, clever enough to be useful, too fragile to be threatening. But something had changed in Ambassador Osei's eyes at that council meeting. Something that made the Watcher dig deeper into humanity's hidden networks. What it found should have been impossible. Humanity had not been passive these past 2 centuries. They had not simply accepted their inferior status and hoped for better treatment. They had studied. They had planned. They had built. Their public technology was generations behind the elder races. Their hidden technology was generations ahead. The Watcher discovered research into dimensional folding that the Vethkai had abandoned as too dangerous 5,000 years ago. It found weapon systems based on principles that no other species had ever considered. It uncovered a fleet that dwarfed official estimates by a factor of 30. But the most disturbing discovery was the psychological profiles. Humanity had studied every species in the Concord. They knew the fears and weaknesses of each race. They understood the social structures that held alien civilizations together, and the pressure points that could make them crumble. They had prepared detailed strategies for war against every major power in the galaxy, and they had done all of this while smiling and playing the fool. The Watcher attempted to calculate the probability of its original assessment being correct. The numbers came back as essentially 0. It had been wrong. Completely, catastrophically wrong. These creatures were not prey learning to survive among predators. They were predators who had chosen to wear the skin of prey. The Watcher faced a decision. It could alert the elder races. It could warn them about what was coming. Perhaps they could unite in time to crush humanity before the truth emerged. But the Watcher was old and wise enough to recognize a losing proposition. Humanity had prepared for this scenario. They had prepared for every scenario. Any attempt to stop them now would only make the inevitable more painful. Instead, the Watcher sent a single encrypted message to Admiral Vance. "I see you now. I have always watched, but I never truly saw. I will not interfere. But I wish to understand, why did you hide for so long?" Vance read the message alone in her quarters. She considered ignoring it. But the Watcher was ancient and powerful, and having it as a neutral observer might prove useful. She typed her response carefully. "We hid because we had to learn. When we first entered the galaxy, we were children, eager and hopeful and painfully naive. We thought that other species would welcome us as equals. We thought that the universe was basically fair. We learned the truth quickly. The strong take from the weak. The old dismiss the young. The powerful do not share power, they hoard it. If we had revealed our potential early, the elder races would have united to destroy us before we could grow. So we smiled. We nodded. We accepted every insult and remembered every slight. We studied your technologies and improved upon them in secret. We analyzed your cultures and found your weaknesses. We built a civilization in the shadows while you watched our performance in the light." The Watcher read this and felt something that might have been respect, or perhaps fear. "But you could have remained hidden forever," it replied. "You could have kept building in secret until no force in the galaxy could challenge you. Why reveal yourselves now?" Vance's response was simple. "Because 900 million of our people were told to abandon their homes. Because the Dominion laughed at the idea of humans standing up for themselves. Because there are limits to patience, even for us. We did not want this war. We did not seek conquest or revenge. We only wanted to be left alone to grow and thrive. But the galaxy would not allow that. The galaxy kept pushing, kept demanding, kept treating us as less than nothing. And now the galaxy will learn what we become when we stop pretending." The Watcher saved this exchange in its deepest memory banks. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would need to understand how humanity had become what it was becoming. The months passed quickly. On the 3 disputed colony worlds, humanity began a quiet evacuation. Ships descended in the night. Families gathered their belongings. Cities were emptied block by block, building by building. But they were not fleeing to other human worlds. They were being relocated to hidden stations, secret habitats that did not exist in any official record. 900 million people vanished into the dark between stars. The Dominion sent observers to monitor the evacuation. They reported that humanity was complying with the Concord's decision. They noted that human colonists wept as they left their homes. They described the scene as pitiful but satisfactory. They did not notice that the tears were performance. They did not notice that the evacuation was happening far too smoothly, far too efficiently. They did not notice the silent ships gathering in the darkness at the edge of the system. Lord Vekros received the reports with satisfaction. Humanity was behaving exactly as expected. In a few more weeks, the Dominion would claim its new territories, and the galaxy would move on. He had no idea that his fleet was flying toward an ambush that had been 2 centuries in the making. The countdown had begun. Humanity's patience was almost at its end, and somewhere in the cold depths of space, Admiral Elena Vance stood on the bridge of her true flagship, not the modest Vigilant, but the ESS Prometheus, a vessel that would have made the elder races weep with terror if they had known it existed. "All units report ready," Commander Chen announced. Vance nodded slowly. 200 years. 200 years of hiding, planning, preparing. 200 years of swallowing pride and maintaining the mask. It was almost over. "Hold position," she ordered. "Let them come to us. Let them feel safe. And then," she thought, "let them learn what fear really means." The Dominion fleet entered human colonial space on a bright morning by ship time. Lord Vekros stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Wrath, and watched the stars slide past. Behind him stretched 200 warships, enough firepower to conquer most civilizations. For humanity, it was overkill. Everyone knew that. The Shah did not expect resistance. They expected to find empty worlds. Perhaps a few stubborn colonists who had refused to leave. They would remove these stragglers, claim the planets, and return home as heroes. Vekros allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The human ambassador's defiance had been amusing, but ultimately meaningless. Words were not weapons. Pride was not power. Approaching the first colony world, his tactical officer reported, Sensors show no military presence. The evacuation appears complete. As expected, bring us into orbit. I want survey teams on the ground within the hour. The fleet descended toward the planet. The cities below were dark and silent. Streets that had bustled with human life now stood empty. Buildings had been stripped of valuables. Only the shells remained. Vecros felt a flicker of disappointment. He had secretly hoped for some resistance, a chance to demonstrate Dominion superiority in combat. But the humans had fled, like the frightened creatures they were. Lord Vecros. The tactical officer's voice carried a strange note. We are detecting an anomaly. What kind of anomaly? Unknown. Sensors are showing something at the edge of the system. But the readings make no sense. Vecros turned to the display screens. Strange patterns flickered across them, energy signatures that did not match any known configuration. Explain. I cannot, my lord. The readings suggest a massive presence, but there is nothing visible. Perhaps a sensor malfunction. The universe tore open. There was no other way to describe it. Space itself seemed to fold and split, and from the wounds in reality poured ships. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They emerged in perfect formation, moving with a synchronization that should have been impossible for such large numbers. Each vessel was sleek and angular, built from materials that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. They looked like pieces of the void given form. Vecros stared at the display, his ancient mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This could not be humanity. Humanity had perhaps 50 combat-capable ships. Humanity was a Class 7 civilization with primitive technology and limited resources. This fleet outnumbered his own 15-1. Incoming transmission, his communications officer said. Her voice trembled. Put it through. A human face appeared on the main screen. Vecros recognized the woman, Admiral Elena Vance, commander of Earth's pathetic defensive fleet. But something was different about her now. The quiet deference was gone. In its place was something cold and terrible. Lord Vecros, Vance said. Welcome to human space. This is impossible. Vecros managed. Where did these ships come from? How? For 200 years, the galaxy told us we were weak. For 200 years, we let you believe it. We smiled at your insults. We nodded at your demands. We watched and we learned and we built. Vance leaned forward slightly. You were given 2 centuries to learn kindness. You chose arrogance instead. You cannot threaten the Dominion. The Concord will. The Concord voted to take our worlds. The Concord chose its side. And now you will carry a message back to them. Vance's eyes were ice. Lesson 1 begins now. The transmission ended. For a long moment, nobody on the Dominion bridge moved. Then Vecros found his voice. Battle formations. All ships prepare to. He never finished the sentence. The human fleet attacked with precision that seemed almost supernatural. They did not charge forward in a mass assault like most species. They moved in complex patterns, individual ships weaving through formations that looked chaotic but were mathematically perfect. And their weapons were wrong. Completely, terrifyingly wrong. Dominion shields were considered among the strongest in the galaxy. They could withstand direct hits from stellar-class weapons. They had protected Shal ships for 10,000 years. Human weapons passed through them like they did not exist. The first volley destroyed 30 Dominion vessels before they could return fire. The ships simply ceased to exist, not exploding, not burning, but vanishing, as if they had never been real. The weapons seemed to erase matter rather than destroy it. Vecros watched his fleet die and felt something he had not experienced in 3,000 years. Genuine fear. Return fire. All weapons, maximum power. His ships fired everything they had. Plasma beams, kinetic projectiles, gravity bombs, the accumulated weaponry of 10 millennia of warfare. Some shots hit human vessels directly. The humans did not even slow down. Their ships absorbed the attacks without visible damage. Where Dominion weapons should have torn through hulls, human armor simply swallowed the energy. Where explosions should have ripped ships apart, the vessels repaired themselves within seconds. The tactical officer was hyperventilating. Their hulls are regenerating. They are using harvested stellar matter to repair damage in real time. This technology does not exist. This cannot exist. But it did exist. Humanity had simply not shown it to anyone. The battle, if it could be called a battle, lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, 183 Dominion warships had been destroyed or disabled. Human losses were 0. Only the Eternal Wrath remained intact, and that was not by accident. Human vessels surrounded the flagship, their weapons charged and ready. A boarding craft attached to the main airlock, and Vekros watched helplessly as the doors were forced open. Human soldiers entered his ship. They moved with terrifying efficiency, neutralizing his guards without killing them. Their armor made them look more like machines than living creatures, sleek and black and merciless. But the most terrifying thing happened when one soldier was killed. A Shal warrior managed to hit a human directly with a plasma bolt. The human fell, clearly dead. Vekros felt a moment of satisfaction. The invaders were not invincible after all. Then the dead human's body began to glow. 3 minutes later, a new body grew from the remains. The same soldier, same face, same equipment, same cold determination, rose to his feet and continued advancing. Consciousness transfer. The tactical officer whispered in horror. They have overcome death itself. How do you fight an enemy that cannot die? You do not, Vekros realized. You cannot. Admiral Vance boarded the Eternal Wrath personally. She walked through corridors littered with stunned Shal warriors until she reached the command deck. Her soldiers had already secured the area. Vekros stood alone in the center of his bridge. His weapons had been taken. His crew had been removed. He had nothing left but his ancient pride. You will pay for this, he said. The Concord will unite against you. Every species in the galaxy will see you as a threat to be destroyed. Vance considered this. Then she smiled, a cold, thin expression. Perhaps. But before they decide anything, they need to understand what they are facing. She turned to her communications officer. Broadcast the battle footage to the entire Concord. Every species. Every world. Full resolution. No editing. Transmission ready, Admiral. Send it. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the Dominion fleet die. They watched weapons that should not exist tear through shields that should have been impenetrable. They watched soldiers who could not be killed rise again and again. They watched one of the galaxy's great powers broken in 11 minutes by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. And they were afraid. On the bridge of the Eternal Wrath, Vance turned back to Vekros. You asked how this was possible. The answer is simple. You never saw us clearly. You looked at our short lives and saw weakness. We saw urgency. Every human alive knows that their time is limited. We do not have millennia to achieve our goals. We have decades. Sometimes, less. She stepped closer to the ancient Shal Lord. Your species spent 10,000 years reaching this level of technology. We matched and exceeded it in 2 centuries. Because we could not afford to wait. Because every moment mattered. Because we learned long ago that the universe does not reward patience, it rewards results. Vekros said nothing. There was nothing to say. Go back to the Concord, Vance continued. Tell them what you saw. Tell them that humanity wants only to be treated as equals. We do not seek conquest. We do not want revenge. We want to live in peace, raise our children, and explore the stars. And if they refuse? Vance's eyes went hard. Then they will learn what happens when the quiet ones finally raise their voices. She turned and walked away. Behind her, the Eternal Wrath's engines reactivated. Human technicians had already restored basic function. Get him out of our space, she ordered. Let him carry our message home. As the lone Dominion ship limped toward Concord territory, the human fleet remained in perfect formation. They had won the first battle. But everyone knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had been shaken. Now it had to decide what to do about the monsters it had created. In her quarters aboard the Prometheus, Admiral Vance finally allowed herself a moment of exhaustion. She was 53 years old, and she had just changed the course of galactic history. A message arrived from Earth. The United Council wanted a full report. She began to write, but her mind kept drifting to the future. The Conquered would respond, she was certain of that. Some species would surrender immediately. Others would fight. The Vethkai, especially, would not accept being surpassed by young creatures with brief lives. War was coming. Real war. Not the quick demonstration they had just conducted, but humanity was ready. They had been ready for a very long time. Vance finished her report and sent it. Then she stared out the window at the stars that humanity had finally claimed as their own. 200 years, she whispered to no one. 200 years of smiling and nodding and being treated like nothing. No more. The darkness between stars seemed to listen, and somewhere in that darkness, the Watcher recorded everything, knowing that the galaxy would never be the same again. The footage of the Dominion's destruction played on every world in the Concord. Billions of beings watched the impossible battle unfold. They watched ancient warships vanish like shadows in sunlight. They watched human soldiers die and rise again. They watched Lord Vecros, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, stand helpless as his empire crumbled around him. And then they began to panic. On the crystal worlds of the Vethkai, the eldest of all civilizations gathered in their sacred chambers. They had ruled the galaxy for longer than most species had existed. They had watched countless younger races rise and fall. They had always assumed they would outlast them all. Now they faced a threat unlike anything they had imagined. The humans must be destroyed, declared High Elder Creonus. His crystalline body pulsed with angry light. They are a disease that has infected the galaxy. If we allow them to survive, they will consume everything. They offered peace, another elder noted. Their ambassador stated clearly that they do not seek conquest. And you believe them? They hid their true nature for 200 years. They smiled at us while building weapons to destroy us. Everything they have ever said has been a lie. The Vethkai were not the only species demanding action. Across the Concord, fear transformed into fury. The humans had deceived everyone. The humans had made fools of the galaxy's greatest powers. The humans had to pay, but not everyone agreed. Smaller species, those who had suffered under the dominance of the elder races, saw something different in the battle footage. They saw a people who had been pushed too far, finally pushing back. Some began to whisper that perhaps humanity's victory was not a tragedy but a sign of change. Ambassador Osei returned to the Concord chamber under circumstances very different from his last visit. The Great Hall was filled with fear and anger. Delegates who had once ignored him now watched his every movement with intense attention. He took his seat calmly, as if nothing had changed. The Vethkai speaker addressed him directly. The human delegation will explain itself. How does your species justify this unprovoked attack on Concord members? Osei stood slowly. Unprovoked? The Dominion was given 3 of our worlds. 900 million of our citizens were ordered to abandon their homes. When we objected, we were laughed at. When we asked for consideration, we were dismissed. The attack on our sovereignty was the provocation. We simply responded. You destroyed an entire fleet. We defended ourselves. We warned Lord Vecros to withdraw. He chose to advance. The consequences were his responsibility. Osei paused, letting his words settle. But we are not here to relitigate the past. We are here to discuss the future. He pulled up a holographic display showing humanity's terms. The list was short and simple. First, humanity demands recognition as a Class 1 civilization with full voting rights in the Concord. Second, we demand reparations for 2 centuries of economic exploitation, unfair trade deals, denied technology access, and territorial violations. Third, we demand a tribunal to address crimes committed against human colonists by Concord members over the past 200 years. The chamber erupted in outrage. Class 1 status was reserved for the eldest and most powerful species. Only the Vethkai and 2 others held this rank. For humans to demand equality was unthinkable. And what do you intend to take from us? The Vethkai speaker demanded. Our worlds? Our resources? Our submission? Osei shook his head slowly. Nothing. We want nothing from you except to never kneel again. We have no interest in conquest. We have no desire for revenge. We want only to live as equals in a galaxy that has treated us as inferior. Lies, High Elder Creonus declared, stepping forward. His crystal form blazed with light. You have shown your true nature. You are predators. You will devour us all if we do not stop you now. We are not predators, Osei replied quietly. We are survivors. There is a difference. Predators hunt because they enjoy it. Survivors fight because they have no other choice. For 200 years, we chose not to fight. We accepted our treatment because we hoped the galaxy would learn to see us as equals. We were wrong. But even now, we do not want war. We want peace. True peace, built on mutual respect. The chamber fell silent. Many delegates had never heard a human speak this way directly, without apology, without the subservient tone they had come to expect. High Elder Creonus made his decision. The Vethkai reject these terms. We will not bow to children. We will not reward deception with status, and we will not allow your species to threaten the order we have maintained for 100,000 years. He transmitted a command to his homeworld. We possess a weapon that has never been used. A stellar ignition device capable of turning any star into a supernova. Your sun, human, is now targeted. Surrender immediately, or we will erase your homeworld from existence. The threat landed like a physical blow. Other delegates gasped. Some looked at the Vethkai with horror. Using such a weapon would make them monsters. Others looked at the humans, expecting fear and capitulation. Osei's expression did not change. You would destroy Earth, if necessary, and the billions of innocent lives on our world? Casualties of your own ambition. You should have remained in your place. Osei nodded slowly, as if he had expected this. I see. You believe that our love for our homeworld makes us weak. You believe we will surrender rather than lose Earth. Of course you will. All species value their origin worlds. It is the one leverage that never fails. Osei smiled. It was the same cold smile he had shown Vekros months ago. Admiral Vance, he said into his communication device. The Vethkai have threatened Earth with a stellar ignition weapon. They demand our surrender. Vance's voice came back clear and calm. Understood, Ambassador. Initiating response. The Vethkai speaker frowned. What response? What are you doing? You assumed our love for Earth makes us weak. You were half right. Osei turned to face the entire chamber. We love our home more than you can possibly understand, but humanity did not survive ice ages, plagues, and world wars by surrendering to those who threaten what we love. You have made your choice. Now witness ours. On every display screen in the chamber, footage appeared from the Sol system. Human ships surrounded Earth, not in defensive formation, but in a complex geometric pattern. Strange energy readings spiked across sensors. What are they doing? Cryonis demanded. Something your scientists said was impossible. Osei replied. The energy readings peaked. Space around Earth began to distort. The planet, an entire world, 10,000 kilometers in diameter, began to move. Not through space in the conventional sense. It folded space itself, passing through dimensions that other species had only theorized about. In the span of 17 seconds, Earth relocated to a new star system 3,000 light-years away. The chamber watched in stunned silence. The Vethkai weapon fired at the original coordinates. Sol, humanity's parent star, erupted into a supernova that would burn for centuries. But Earth was already gone. The weapon destroyed nothing but empty space. We can move worlds, Osei said into the silence. We can relocate entire populations in moments. Your weapon cannot threaten what it cannot find. Cryonis stared at the displays, his ancient mind struggling to process what he had seen. Planet relocation was supposed to be impossible. The energy requirements alone should have been beyond any civilization, but the humans had done it casually, as if it were routine. What are you? He whispered. We are humanity, Osei replied. We are what you made us. You looked at our brief lives and saw weakness. You did not see that every moment mattered to us, that we could not afford to waste time. You looked at our small territory and saw insignificance. You did not see that we were concentrating our growth, not limiting it. You looked at our smiles and saw submission. You did not see that we were studying you, learning everything we needed to know. He stepped toward the Vethkai elder. 200 years ago, we were children. You could have crushed us easily. Instead, you ignored us. You insulted us. You gave us time to grow. That was your mistake. The only one that mattered. Cryonis had no response. For the first time in his incredibly long life, he had nothing to say. The terms stand, Osei continued. Class 1 status, reparations, tribunal, and peace. Actual peace. Not the forced submission you have called peace for millennia. Humanity will not be a conquering species. We have no interest in ruling others, but we will never again allow ourselves to be ruled. He looked around the chamber slowly. Each of you must make a choice. You can accept us as equals, or you can try to destroy us. But understand this. Every species that has tried to destroy humanity has failed. The Dominion fleet is gone. The Vethkai weapon is useless. We have spent 2 centuries preparing for every possible attack. There is nothing you can do that we have not already planned for. The silence stretched on. Finally, A delegate from a smaller species stood. The Threll were insectoids who had been conquered by the Vethkai thousands of years ago. They had never spoken against their masters. The Threll accept humanity's terms, their delegate said. We recognize them as equals. Another species followed. Then another. And another. Within an hour, more than half the conquered had broken with the elder races. Species who had lived in fear for millennia saw their chance and took it. If humanity could stand against the Vethkai, perhaps the old order could finally change. Cryonis watched his alliance crumble. The crystalline elder, who had never known defeat, experienced something new. The taste of irrelevance. This is not over, he said finally. The Vethkai do not surrender. Then you will continue to lose. Ose replied. But we will always be willing to make peace. The choice is yours. He walked out of the chamber without looking back. Behind him, the galaxy rearranged itself around the new reality. Humanity was no longer a footnote. They were a force that would shape the future. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, Admiral Vance received the news. She allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Then she began planning for the battles still to come. The Vethkai would not accept defeat easily. But humanity had waited 2 centuries for this moment. They could wait a little longer. The months that followed changed the galaxy forever. The Vethkai did not go quietly. They launched 3 more attacks against human territory, each one larger and more desperate than the last. Each one ended the same way in complete defeat. Human technology was not simply advanced. It was different. While the elder races had spent millennia refining the same basic principles, humanity had started from nothing and questioned everything. They had not asked, how do we improve existing technology? They had asked what is possible if we ignore all assumptions. The answers had terrified the galaxy. But what broke the Vethkai was not military defeat. It was something deeper. They had defined themselves as the galaxy's oldest and wisest civilization. Their entire culture rested on the belief that they were superior to all younger species. To be so utterly outmaneuvered by creatures who lived less than a century destroyed something fundamental in their collective spirit. Some Vethkai chose to end their existence rather than accept the new reality. Others retreated to their core worlds and refused all contact with outside species. Within a year, the once mighty Vethkai dominion had shrunk to a shadow of its former self. The Shal fared better, if only because they accepted defeat more practically. Lord Vekros, humiliated but alive, returned to his people with a simple message: adapt or die. The Dominion signed humanity's terms and began the painful process of treating former inferiors as equals. Across the galaxy, power shifted. Species that had been oppressed for millennia found their voices. Trade routes that had favored the elder races were renegotiated. Laws that had kept smaller civilizations in permanent servitude were rewritten. And at the center of it all, humanity remained. They did not build an empire. Ambassador Osei had meant what he said. Humanity wanted equality, not dominance. Human ships patrolled the borders, but they did not conquer. Human technology transformed industries, but it was shared freely with any species that asked. Human diplomats sat in every major council, but they voted for justice rather than advantage. It was confusing to races who had only known power as a tool for control. Why would anyone accumulate such strength and not use it to dominate others? The Watcher, ancient and ever-observing, finally understood. Humanity had suffered too much to become oppressors. They had experienced slavery, genocide, and war on their own world. They knew what it meant to be crushed by those with more power. They had no desire to inflict that same pain on others, but they also had no intention of ever experiencing it again. The balance was strange and new. Human fleets could have subjugated the galaxy in months. Instead, they protected trade routes and responded to distress calls from any species, regardless of past conflicts. Human scientists could have hoarded their discoveries. Instead, they published openly, helping other civilizations advance far faster than they ever had before. Some species remained suspicious. They watched humanity with wary eyes, waiting for the mask to slip, waiting for the conqueror to emerge. But year after year, decade after decade, the mask never slipped, because there was no mask. Humanity genuinely wanted peace. They had simply prepared for war because they knew peace required strength. 20 years after the awakening, Admiral Elena Vance stood on the observation deck of a human orbital station. She was 73 now. her hair fully gray, her body beginning to slow, but her mind remained sharp, and her eyes still held that cold fire that had terrified Lord Vecros so long ago. Below her, a new human colony was being established on a world that the Dominion had once claimed. Children played in the streets of a growing city. Families built homes. Schools and hospitals rose from the alien soil. 900 million people had been told to abandon their homes. Now billions lived freely across the stars. Ambassador Osei joined her at the viewing window. He had aged too, nearly 80 now. His steps slower, his voice softer, but he still served humanity and the conquered, and he was still the most respected diplomat in the galaxy. The Threll delegation wants to name a holiday after you, he said. Something about liberation from ancient oppression. I told them you would probably refuse. Vance snorted softly. I was a soldier. I did what soldiers do. The diplomats did the harder work. We both know that is not true. Without the fleet, without the demonstration, none of this would have happened. Perhaps. She watched the children below. They were too young to remember the fear, the uncertainty, the 2 centuries of pretending to be less than they were. They had only known a galaxy where humanity stood tall. Do you think they will ever stop fearing us? She asked. Osei considered the question carefully. He always considered questions carefully. It was what made him good at his job. No, he said finally. Fear is easier than trust, and trust takes generations to build. The species that remember our awakening will always carry that fear. They will always wonder what else we are hiding. That seems sad. It is, but it is also reality. He paused. However, their children might learn to respect us instead, and their children's children might call us friends. Change happens slowly. We, of all people, should understand that. Vance smiled. It was a rare expression for her, and it still did not come naturally. But it was genuine. Then we keep waiting, she said. That is what we are good at after all. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the colony grow. Far across the galaxy, the Watcher composed its final analysis of humanity. It had observed countless species over countless millennia, but none had fascinated it like these brief, brilliant creatures. They had survived through patience. They had grown through secrecy. They had triumphed through unity. And when they finally revealed themselves, they had chosen mercy over vengeance. Why? The Watcher had asked this question many times. The answer was always the same, though it took many forms. Humanity did not want to become what had oppressed them. They had felt the boot on their neck, and they refused to place that boot on anyone else. Their strength came not from cruelty but from compassion, the determination to build a better galaxy for everyone, not just themselves. It was a strange philosophy. Most species, given such power, would have chosen domination. But humanity had looked at the galaxy's history of conquest and bloodshed and said simply, no more. The Watcher saved its analysis and prepared to observe the centuries to come. It suspected that humanity's true story was only beginning. On the colony world, a young girl looked up at the stars. She was 8 years old, born on this world that her grandparents had almost lost. She knew the stories, everyone knew the stories of how humanity had hidden and grown and finally awakened. But to her, they were just stories. Her reality was a galaxy where humans walked proudly among the stars, where no species could dismiss them as insignificant, where the future stretched out with infinite possibility. Mom, she asked, what was it like before? Her mother, who had been a child during the evacuation, paused to consider the question. It was hard. We had to pretend to be small so that others would not fear us. We had to smile when we wanted to scream, and stay quiet when we wanted to shout. Why? Because we were not ready yet. Because the galaxy was not ready for us. She knelt beside her daughter. But now things are different. Now you can be exactly who you are, without hiding. That is what your grandparents fought for. That is what all of us work toward. The girl thought about this. So I should be grateful? No. You should be yourself. That is enough. That is all any of us ever wanted. Above them, human ships crossed the sky, not hiding, not pretending, simply existing as they truly were. The galaxy had learned to accept their presence, even if it had not yet learned to fully trust them. And somewhere in the distance, Ambassador Corin Osei and Admiral Elena Vance watched the same stars from their orbital station, 2 old warriors who had spent their lives preparing for a moment that had come and gone, leaving behind a galaxy transformed. Do you have any regrets? Osei asked. Vance thought about the question for a long time. I wish it had not been necessary. I wish the galaxy had simply accepted us as equals from the beginning. But given how things were, no, we did what we had to do. We protected our people, and we did not become monsters in the process. That was the hardest part, Osei agreed. Having the power to destroy everything and choosing not to use it, that is what separates us from the old empires. They saw power as license to dominate. We see it as responsibility to protect. As long as we remember that difference, we will be fine. They fell silent again. The stars burned on, indifferent and eternal. Humanity had awakened, and the galaxy had trembled. But now the trembling was over. A new age had begun, an age of equals, of shared discovery, of hope. It would not be perfect. Nothing ever was. There would be conflicts and misunderstandings, old hatreds and new fears. But for the first time in galactic history, every species had a voice. Every civilization had a chance. That was humanity's true gift to the stars. Not their weapons or their technology or their impossible achievements. Just the simple, radical idea that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity. The quiet ones had spoken, and the galaxy was listening. Admiral Vance turned away from the window at last. She had served her species for 50 years, and she was tired. But it was a good tiredness, the exhaustion of work completed, of duty fulfilled. Time to rest, she said. Osei nodded. We have earned it. They walked together toward their quarters, two old humans who had changed everything. Behind them, the stars continued their endless dance, now witnessed by a humanity that finally stood among them as equals. And the universe, vast and ancient and full of wonders, seemed to whisper a single word to the species that had once been dismissed as nothing. Welcome home.